Alright, here we go. 4 hours later, after he'd said his goodbyes, the nurse's phrase, not his, after they'd covered Susie up and wheeled her to some steel drawer in the basement, after Susie's sister came to peel their mother up off the floor, Chris stands smoking on the back deck of what had been their house. His house now, he supposes. The house is only 15 years old, but made to look like a massive frontier cabin. From the driveway, it has an imposing fortress-like aspect that both Chris and Susie enjoyed. It makes Chris think of Hrothgar's Great Hall in Beowulf. And with the way the Black Forest presses in on all sides, it's possible to imagine a Grendel out there, sucking marrow from bones and biding his time. The back betrays it, though. Enormous windows look out over the deck and the field beyond. It's a big deck made of redwood. Susie hadn't liked that, said it was irresponsible, and Chris nodded appropriately, but he had secretly been taken by it. He thought in the summer he'd set up an easel back there. He never had, but it was a nice thought. The cigarette is his first in years. He bought the pack on the way home, angrily telling himself that, with Susie gone, there was no reason not to. He quit for her. But the nicotine settles oddly in his nerves, twanging them like a wire. And the smoke tastes grotty in his mouth. Moonlight melts through the scrum of winter clouds, painting the snowy field in diffuse, fluidic silver. Distant pines scratch at the sky. Wind drags sibilant utterances through the treetops. A barn owl screeches somewhere, shrilling into the night and making Chris think about the way Susie's mother screamed into the phone. A coyote makes a startled yip in response. She was 38 years old, was being the operative word, and how weird that feels to contemplate. The difference between was and is only 2 letters, but the gulf between them is a vast abyss, the lightless expanse between galaxies. He can't reconcile himself to the notion that he's occupying a world in which Susie doesn't exist, a world where this house is only his. No one should die that young. It's the stupidest cliche, but it fits because running a stoplight and plowing your Jeep into a lamppost at 50 miles per hour is a pretty stupid way to die, especially when you're not even drunk. It's not late enough for you to be tired, and the street's clear of ice. When your husband is at home drawing, drinking scotch, listening to Spotify, and can't do anything to stop you. Chris pitches the hash-smoke butt out of the railing, watches the trailing ember fizz in the snow, and thinks about her face. Not the way it was in the hospital, all lumpy and wrapped in gauze, or even the way it was the morning after she left. He thinks about the first night they met almost 9 years ago. It was goth night at this underground club called the Astrological. Some crappy Bauhaus cover band played earlier in the night, and then they moved on to a DJ who was spinning all the 90s industrial goth shit. My Life with a Thrill Coquette, Lords of Acid, Raised in Black, harder stuff like Rammstein in the rainy season. The strobes flashed. Chris stood up in the balcony, leaning on the railing. He watched the way the convulsive light played with his cigarette smoke, how it made it crystalline and textural. And there she was, dancing with some skinny, long-haired guy in black vinyl pants. The song was the Electric Hellfire Club's version of Sympathy for the Devil, and later he discovered that was perfect because Interview with the Vampire was her favorite movie. Chris was more sci-fi geek than death rocker, goth adjacent at best. Susie was the real deal. Her movements were snake-like, liquid. He couldn't quite see her face, not yet, but he noticed the long black hair and goth bangs, the milk paleness of her skin, the way her boobs pushed out of the top of her corset. His first thought was, oh shit, because she looked like Carolyn, and that was the last thing he needed. But then he saw that she was shorter and a bit plumper, and wore these black-framed glasses that caught the strobe and sent it scattering. He couldn't tear his eyes away. Later, when they stood side by side at the bar, he was aware of her smell, lavender, with an intoxicating underhint of sweat. He noticed that her eyes, magnified behind those Coke bottle lenses, were icy gray. She wore a small Celtic cross on a silver chain, upside down, of course. A little mole darkened the skin just above her collarbone. He suddenly wanted nothing more than to brush that mole with his lips. She caught him staring. You looking at my mole or my tits? She grinned as she said it, so maybe it was okay. But he shocked himself by coming back with, both, I guess. His heart plunged into his ankles. But she laughed and said, I'm Susie, if you're interested. Just about the least goth name he could have imagined. But she wore it well, with confidence. He wasn't looking to date or even hook up. The shit show with Carolyn had ended less than a week before, but he was drawn to her. They chatted a while, until Skinny McLonghair made his way back to the bar. He started sulking the second his eyes landed on Chris. He whispered something into Susie's ear. She nodded, and the two of them faded off into the crowd. He watched them go, hoping she'd throw him an over-the-shoulder glance. She didn't. Chris glimpsed them dancing one more time, Skinny McLonghair trying to grind on her, but pivoting deftly away. Then just before he was about to leave, he bumped into her by the bathrooms. She grabbed his phone and disappeared into the ladies' room, leaving him standing, flummoxed in the murky hallway. When she came back, she handed him the phone and said, "Call me so I have yours." He did. Then she flitted away, presumably back to Skinny. "I'll call her tomorrow," he thought, doubting seriously that he would. Carolyn was still a burn scar in his heart. But 2 hours later, as he lay in bed and drifted off, his phone rang. Sympathy for the Devil, the GNR version from the movie. Later, she told him that it was the only version that mattered. He groped for his phone, saw Susie on the screen above a picture of her duck facing before a toilet stall. She'd been busy in the bathroom. Another crazy one, he thought, and answered. Chris is on his third heavy drink, gazing out the window and moon. Gazing out at the snow and moon and trees, sloshing the 21-year-old Benriach idly in the tumbler. He'd bought the bottle after he sold the movie rights to The Things You Will Become. The comic had done well enough that he and Susie were able to upgrade to a 3-bedroom apartment on Tejo near campus. It was a fun story about a bumbling Whitechapel cop who happened to be a vampire, hunting Jack the Ripper. The art was very from Hell era Eddie Campbell, but the sense of humor was pure Peter Sellers. The classic tone shouldn't have worked, but did. He'd taken the title from Anne Rice, which pleased Susie no end. The Benriach had been a present to himself, and at nearly $200 it felt extravagant. Then, when he realized how much money he was actually going to make on the movie deal, he put the bottle unopened in the pantry, and he and Susie started looking at houses. He wanted to go deeper into the mountains, harboring his stupid hunter's taunts and fantasies. She gently reminded him that she still had a job in the city. Black Forest was the compromise. That's the way it was with them, every potential thorny patch ultimately revealing a wide and open path. It was too easy. That should have scared him. The phone rings. Something leaps into his esophagus and he bites down. He sets the tumbler on the railing and turns. The window looks in on the dark living room, which just now feels like the abyssal mouth of a vast undersea creature. A square pinprick of light punctures the blackness. It's Sympathy for the Devil, muted by the window, but distinct, the only version that matters. Chris swallows and glides numb to the glass door. Blood roars in his ears. He rattles the door open just as the song cuts off, interrupted by an obnoxious beep. That square of light vanishes. Darkness swallows everything. He stands there, half in the house, his teeth chattering against the cold that crackles through him so deep it feels like his bones will shatter. He waits for the second beep that signals a voicemail. The song starts up again, that slithery tribal rhythm. The screen lights up. Chris wants to scream. He hurries forward and grabs it off the coffee table. The bathroom stall selfie has long since been replaced with their engagement photo, Susie and Chris arm in arm beneath a cottonwood tree, grinning lunatic up from the cracked glass. The caller ID reads Susie. He swipes. Hello? There's nothing at first, just that low suboral hum that tells him the connection is live. Hello? He spins, suddenly certain there's someone on the back porch, face pressed to the window. The certainty is so powerful that just for a second he actually sees her. The shadow, backlit by the moon. Blink and you miss it, she's gone. Except it wasn't Susie. It was an almost Susie. A little taller, a little thinner, like... Through the phone, a woman gasps. It's a sharp, English sound. The name falls from his mouth before he can stop it. Susie? Click. Beep, beep, beep. Chris stares at the screen. No picture of him and Susie now, just the simple declarative, call failed. Susie, he thinks. But something clangs and rattles in his head, because whatever that was, it wasn't Susie. Thank you.
Woo!